Hi everyone, it's Karen here and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a brand new tutorial with an art journaling page created again in my Joggles discount art journal. Today's art journal is focusing on going with the flow, and it's part of a guest design team challenge that I am participating in. I was invited to participate in the Art Playground blog. I am the guest designer for June, and the theme this month is Go with the Flow. And I thought, what better way than going with the flow than creating an art journal? I always use that phrase whenever I'm doing any type of art, going with the flow. When I make mistakes, I just go with the flow. I let them happen, even if I don't like them, and I just work and try to fix it. And this was the perfect theme for me. And what better way to go with the flow with having a theme about fish? I really wanted to incorporate a fish into my art journal, and that's what I did. The first thing I did is I took an embossed marker from Ranger. This is a clear embossed marker that you can add embossing powder on it and emboss. And all I did is doodle some lines across both pages of my 6x6 Joggles art journal. And of course, I took the pages out of my journal so it's easier to work with them. And I stuck them together with some tape in the back. Then I took a Princess Gold Ranger embossing powder and added it to the background. I added it everywhere because I wasn't sure where the pen was. And the nice thing about these pens is that they stay wet so you can emboss and create your own design. So you could doodle with it, you could do writing, you can basically do anything, add dots to it. So it's perfect for that because any other embossing ink comes in a pad, so it's harder to control. And this way you can get small details. So I added the powder to both sides, and then I went ahead and heat set it. I wanted to make sure I cover everything and to make sure that the embossing powder completely melts to my background. That way it would create a resist. I know that embossing powder, once melted, becomes resistant to any type of water-soluble mediums. So I knew I was going to add some watercolors onto this, and I wanted to create some kind of movement, some kind of flow to the background. And to do that, I knew that I could emboss with this and have that resist the watercolor. Once I saw that there were some doodle marks missing, I went back after heat setting it and I drew some more lines and melted the embossing powder again. I do not show this step because I had already shown you how to do this. I just wanted you to know that I filled it in at the bottom and at the top because there were some parts where there was no markings. Once the embossing powder was fully melted, I took the Distress Resist ink from Tim Holtz and splattered it across the page in some areas. I wanted to create some splatters in the background that would look like bubbles. And since I was going with resist techniques for this video, this was the perfect product to create resist techniques. And of course, you always know that if you're using this, you must use it inside a box because this medium does not come off anything. It creates a waxy surface on top of everything. Once the resist spray was dry and I did heat set it with my heat tool, I went ahead and added some watercolors. I recently bought this Kuretake Gansai Tambi colors, and let me just tell you, it's amazing. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, but either way, I will put the link below because let me just tell you, these watercolors are super high quality. And I treated myself and I got the 36 colors, which comes with all the colors plus the metallics at the bottom. And all I did is spray a little bit of water both on the paper and inside the palettes of each color that I wanted to use. And then using a watercolor brush, I just applied them to the background. They are super highly pigmented and have so many different beautiful colors that go so well together. I was quite impressed with these watercolors, as I know I have a lot of different types of watercolors because I love experimenting with many of them, but it was just so amazing to see how well they blended and how highly pigmented they were. So I kept on adding different colors to the background, and every once in a while I would add a little bit of water to just blend things. And as you can see, the gold embossed area resisted the watercolors, so you could still see those flowy waves in the background while the watercolor was behind. So of course you can go ahead and always emboss after you put the watercolor and you dry everything, but I really love the resist technique. And what I really liked is that the resist spray created these really cool bubbles in the background, so it really looked like an ocean, and it was the perfect setting to add my fish. So I just continued playing with the colors and adding as many as I wanted. A good tip is to dry up a first layer and then go ahead and add more color on top. That way you really get that deepness of color and the colors don't mix so much with each other. So that's exactly what I did. I heat set the first layer and then I added more color afterwards. It's really important to add darker and lighter tones of the same color and let them mix with each other. By adding different tones and different colors, it gives everything a lot of depth, and you can really make it look as if it's some kind of water. Whether it's a lake or an ocean, that doesn't matter. But the depth comes from using different type of shades of the same colors. Of course, I heat set the background really well to make sure that I could put things on top afterwards. To create the fish, I cut it out of a Hero Arts die cut. And this is a die cut of a fish that I have from before. I originally got this one thinking it was a koi fish, and then I realized that they have another set completely. And I don't know if you've seen my video from a few months ago where I created another art journal using the other Hero Arts stamp and die set. And in that case, I used 3 fish and made them swim around as well. And that was a completely different technique than what I did today. And for this fish, I only had the die for it. I did not have a stamp, as this only comes with the die. So I knew that I could use it and color it with my watercolors. But the first thing I did is I took my embossing ink pen and I went and added some markings to the fish. I added some dots, some lines in the fins and in the tail to make it look more realistic. And then I heat embossed it. That way it would again resist the markings and when I add the watercolor. Once I put the powder, I realized that I had missed some spots, so I did went back and added a few more with my pen, and then heat set and embossed everything. Another thing I did is I also added some markings with the Distress Resist ink. And I was very careful of not getting it everywhere by using the spout. And I just drew lines in certain areas and some dots because I wanted it to resist the watercolor. If you've ever seen koi fish, you see that they have some kind of white and gold markings. And that's what I was trying to recreate. By using the resist ink, it would leave the white in the background when I add the watercolor. I heat set this really well because I wanted to make sure that everything was dry before I added the watercolor. I went back to the palette again and wet all the yellow, oranges, and reds from the palette and started applying it to the fish. I started mixing the different colors together, and as I predicted, the nice thing that happened was that both resist techniques worked on the fish as well. So I was able to get the golden markings with the embossing ink, and I was also able to get some of that white resisting from the background. So that really worked well, and the result was that I got a really realistic looking fish, which is what I was trying to achieve. I also took a little bit of a darker brown color and started outlining around the fish. That didn't work out so well, so you'll see me going back after with a marker and just outlining it later on. So I took my Dilutions black pen and I started outlining the fish and just adding some markings in certain areas. While the ink was wet, I would rub it with my finger just to make sure I get a really nice border around each part of the fish. I also added some markings on the scales, and made sure that I outlined some of them so it adds more interest to the fish itself. Then I grabbed my Prima Finnabair soft matte gel and I glued the fish to the background. I used a white Sharpie paint marker to create some bubbles above the fish. I just doodled them as if the fish bubbles were coming out from his nose. Then I outlined them with the black Dilutions marker. To create a border around the whole journal, I took my VersaMark ink and added a little bit of ink at the edges of the whole journal while it was still attached. You know how much I love adding borders to every journal that I make because I really love framing them. I think they look so much better when they have a border. So this time I took the VersaMark ink and I inked all the edges, and then I took the gold embossing powder again and I added it to all the edges and created a really nice distressed border with the embossing powder. Once it melted, it created a beautiful golden border around everything. And it took me a few minutes to heat set it, but it was worth the wait. For the sentiment, which says go with the flow, I used a stamp set from Conquer the Ninth to write the word flow. I did have a couple of words that said go with from the small talk words from Tim Holtz, but I did not have the word flow, so I decided I was going to stamp it. But I'm usually a terrible stamper because I have no patience to line up things, and when I do line them up, they're not correct. So I attempted this a couple times, and what I ended up doing is I ended up stamping it unevenly. That way it would look like I did that on purpose. And this was the perfect thing for this theme because I was able to kind of go with the flow and not care that the stamping wasn't coming out perfectly. So I placed the words on the other side of the page and I sealed them with the soft matte gel as well. Once I dried the gel, I outlined the words with the black marker. This is a Ranger Football black marker. While I had the marker in my hand, I decided that I was going to outline all the resisted bubbles. So I started circling all the areas where I had bubbles so they would stand out more from the background. These are the bubbles that were created with the resist spray that I had originally put at the beginning. And all I had to do was just outline them because they were lighter than everything else. They almost looked white and they were perfect to create that illusion that there is bubbles all over. Then I had the idea to doodle some seaweed at the bottom of my ocean, and I just started doodling seaweed in different sizes because I really felt that it was missing something. It was too empty. So the seaweed really helped filling it in. I heat set the black markings, and then I took a golden pen. This is a Galaxy golden pen, but any of them would work. And I started filling in the seaweed with the gold marker. This added a lot of interest to the background. It really helped filling it in. And I continued doing this until I actually filled out the bottom of my ocean. I also added some white highlights to the seaweed with my Sharpie marker that I had used before. I kept on adding and drawing some seaweed in the background. I created some even taller ones that would go through the words and also through the fish, behind the fish, so it would give the illusion that the fish is swimming in between them. Finally, when I was done, I took the tape from behind and I attached the art journal back into my 6x6 disc bound journal. And this is why I love it so much, because I'm able to work on a flat surface and then be able to pop it back in, and it looks amazing in the journal as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked my video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends on social media. For more inspiration, subscribe to my channel or visit me on my website. Thank you so much and have an amazing day. Bye!